Welcome to the Simply Joyful podcast live with my special guest, Jennifer PEPITO. Get ready to be encouraged.
Hey,
well, hello.
Kristi. I'm so excited to chat with you. I love watching you. I'm always so inspired by how enthusiastic you are about your topic. So it's an honor to be on your show today.
Oh my goodness. I am so thrilled to have you. This is fun. We met like a couple years back at CHEO, which is the Christian Home Educators Association of California, for those who don't know, our little acronym there. But It's so fun to connect again.
I'm so excited.
Oh, well, why don't we start off for friends who are not familiar with you and all that you do? Can you share a little bit about yourself and your family?
Yeah, so I am the homeschool mom of 7 children. I've been homeschooling them for 23 years now. I've graduated 4, and I just had my second student graduate from university. That was very exciting.
Holy smokes.
Yes, really exciting. And actually, my oldest daughter just turned in her last bit of coursework for her PhD in law. She still has to write her dissertation. But that was, and so I love talking about homeschooling because I know that anybody can do it. I've been married for 30 years this year, and we live out in the kind of the foothills in Sonora, and I run the Peaceful Press, which is an organization devoted to helping families love homeschooling, because I think it's such a beautiful way to build a family culture and really build great thinkers and leaders for their world.
Oh, I love that. Well, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on the show, because I get constantly asked about homeschooling. How do you do it? Why do you do it? What are we doing? So I get that all of the time. And especially with just, right now, there's so many unknowns about the new fall year. Like, will schools be open? Are parents wanting to send their kids to school with all the new, regulations that there are? So I wanted to create like a resource where we have homeschool veterans coming on, and you definitely fit the bill on that one. So homeschool veterans coming on and just sharing a little bit about their experience and just, how we can be a help to them. So, I have to say that I will at some point hijack the conversation to my questions because you have graduated 4 and I just graduated my first, and I'm kind of like, okay, so what did we just do?
Right.
What just happened? So,
Yes.
But what I love about Peaceful Press and all you do there is that, I get asked about curriculum all the time. And I think when I first started homeschooling, that was one of the traps that I fell into, is I felt like, okay, I have to teach all these subjects. So I'm going to get a curriculum for each and every subject I have to teach, which led to burnout. And that is not your style. So I wanted people to hear from you about how to do it in a better, more relaxed style.
Yeah, we follow a really simple Charlotte Mason method. And I think that Charlotte Mason has come to mean so many things now, and it can be very overwhelming for people. But the essential principles for our family is that we read lots of beautiful books together. We talk about the books, we write about the books, and we enjoy nature together. So those are kind of some simple principles. And we do that all together in a very family style of learning. So in the mornings, we just start our day reading the Bible. Usually we're a family of faith, and then we read whatever our chosen literature is. And then we do projects and writing and more research based around that. So, I think that sometimes families get really scared. Oh, if we do something more family centered, are we going to have gaps in the education? But,
right.
Because I've been homeschooling for so long and seeing all of my students, they actually transition into community college in their high school years. And I've seen them all really excel in school. And I think you and I both could agree that there were gaps in our education, no matter how we were schooled. We just can't know everything. We can't learn everything. But by doing a more family-centered and literature-based education, you just learn more deeply, and you remember a little bit more of what you were taught or what you absorbed.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that's what's so crazy to me, is that when you read something, it really just sticks in better than just memorizing facts and dates and things like that. Because there's a place for that. I mean, it's important for kids. Because here, this is when I'm going to do my confession. I will never forget. It was while we were homeschooling. So this is me as a grown adult with a college degree. Granted, it was in science, but I was a grown adult, and I remember we were reading through history, and the Napoleon was part of the Louisiana Purchase, that like Thomas Jefferson, purchased Louisiana from Napoleon. And I was like, wait, what? For some reason, I thought Napoleon was like ancient Greece. I was
Totally.
like, how was I
That's
so
one of the things
off?
that I love about homeschooling is that it's like I'm getting an education along with my children, and my passions fuel our family learning, and that's completely acceptable. I've been able to let our passions fuel our learning and still have children who do really well in college and do really well in high school and in higher level learning.
Oh yeah. And one of the things that you mentioned that I think is so important and that we love is that with homeschooling, especially in the older ages. So my son, who's a junior, he's the one that just graduated. We went, and we're thinking, I'm like, so should we make this, in January, I'm like, should we make this your senior year now? He's like, no, I want to graduate a junior. I'm like, okay, you're a junior, you graduated. But my second son down, he is a sophomore. And so we were able to get him started in junior college. So both of our boys have been doing junior college classes. And the beautiful part about homeschooling is that we're able to adjust their school load at the same time. So they can focus in on those college classes. And we were being really strategic for the dual enrollment and making sure that, we were really picking classes that, like Spanish, that was one of my, everyone's like, how do you teach Spanish? I'm like, I don't.
Right.
I don't. I send them to the junior college and
Yeah,
they teach
absolutely.
them and they
Or
teach them
things like,
well.
yeah, science and higher level math. Those really should, lab science should be taught in a lab. And those are
Yeah.
things that once we've done our elementary years of nature study and watching tadpoles grow and, looking at the specimens under the microscope, then in high school, you let them go to a college class where there's going to be a lab and they're going to actually do more hands-on experimentation. The community college has been an amazing resource.
Oh, absolutely. And it's neat too, because you and I are both in California. So the main thing for people to remember and understand, and I will probably repeat this 5 million times until people grasp it, is every single state has different laws. So you have to know the laws of your state. But here in California, we are not required. We have we're actually a great state to homeschool in, but we're not required to give grades. We're not required to, have like certain stipulations done. And so it's nice for our college classes, when they take these college classes, to get that experience of like, you have a teacher, and it's kind of, I felt like it was like, it's my college preparatory time. I'm like, I'll shove you in a college class and welcome to college prep. So it's been a good introduction into college for at least my kids. I don't know how it's going to go, but what I've also loved is that I've really felt like my kids could learn how to see what their passions are. And so we've been able to take that time and learn what they're really passionate about and what they really love doing. And so it's been really great.
I was able to also take a college class with one of my children. So that's been a really fun experience too, is that my kids see that I'm a learner and I'm continuing to learn. I think it inspires them to keep learning as well. And, I think it's really important to, as moms, recognize, especially if you're thinking about homeschooling and you've never done it before, to recognize that 1 year is not going to make or break your children's educational future.
Mm-mm.
And, with the son that just graduated from university, he was the son that got the least education in my family. He's my middle child, and an older student has learning disabilities. And then I had 4 babies after him. And so he really, he didn't write a lot of papers in the early years. We did some really basic math, but when he got into those college classes, he excelled. And then he just graduated summa cum laude and outstanding student of the year. So I think that families really just have to, in some ways, homeschooling is not for everybody, but it might be for many this coming year, and just take the plunge and enjoy the journey. 1 year is not going to make or break your children's educational future.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's so important for people to understand too, is that there's going to be years that are just crazy. And what I like to remember is that it's not just, I want my kids, like you were saying, to be lifelong learners. So when they see me being a lifelong learner and, and then, I'm trying to get them excited about learning and not completely burned out. It's so healthy, but at the same time, they're learning empathy. We had just some really crazy years here and there, and seasons. Maybe it wasn't the whole year. I mean, we're all just going to admit that 2020, who knows what happened.
Right. They learned a lot of empathy and a lot of faith.
Yes. Oh my goodness. But that's been the beautiful thing. We had, 3 years ago, we lost my father-in-law. And so we took a lot of time to grieve. And that was okay. We've had family members have major surgery. We've had family members who suddenly, would come and, stay with us surprisingly. We had a family who was just having a hard time for a while. They came and lived with us. So there's just seasons where life gets interrupted, and that's okay. And they get to learn and grow through that and see you respond to it as well. Because I like to say this when I'm speaking at homeschool conventions is that, like my goal isn't for my kids just to be great learners. My goal is for them to be great individuals. Like I want to work on their character, and I want to see them grow up, not just to have a great job. I want them to be a good spouse and a great parent, and just to thrive in those roles, because those are the roles that count. And so when they get to experience life with us, they get to see that too.
Yeah, that's been one of our big missions at the Peaceful Press, is when we recognize that our children are more than just a brain. There are so many more facets to our children. There's a Berkeley educator or professor of education, and he said all of the skills necessary for success in high school can be learned in only 2 or 3 years of basic skill study. So in the early years, when we prioritize beautiful literature that teaches, bravery, and it teaches courage, it teaches compassion, when we prioritize that over daily grammar, our children will still enter college with those writing and grammar skills. But what's different is that they have a whole, their development has been more holistic, where their spirit and their soul are cultivated as well. Their empathy, their compassion, their ability to have a discussion with people and reason things through instead of just reacting has been developed. So there's just so many beautiful things that come out of homeschooling, and especially when you can prioritize literature and relationship over just basic skills.
Oh, absolutely. It's so important. And you tapped into your curriculum, like the Peaceful Press. Can you tell me more about that? Because as you were talking, even at the beginning, introducing like, oh, the early years, and you relax and you have nature studies. And I mean, Charlotte Mason, we should go ahead and just say that that is part of a homeschoolese. That is a style of homeschooling. So that when you first start homeschooling, there's a whole new language that you learn. I remember I'm like, what are all these acronyms? You're like, what's your teaching style? What's your kids' learning style? I'm like, I don't know.
Right. And especially when you add in all the different curriculum and they make those all into acronyms. So yes.
I'm like IEW. I'm like, I don't know what that is, but it's the Institute for Excellence in Writing.
Right.
But yeah, there's so many great things out there, and you can have curriculum for every subject. But can you share a little bit about what you guys do with how you do what you do? Let's leave it there.
Absolutely.
That'll be a good question for you.
So with the Peaceful Press, there's a couple of motivations when I wrote it. The first motivation was to help young children develop motor skills, because I think that there's been all this pressure with the schools to get them reading earlier and earlier, and there's been the expense of their motor skills. And so the later learning, like the visual tracking, isn't developed, the fine motor skills aren't developed, so they get writing fatigue. So in the early years with the Peaceful Preschool and our nature guides, we really focus on developing motor skills, fine motor skills, large motor skills, along with the literature and even some practical skills, because a child is not fully developed if they can, read and write, but don't even know how to make their own bed or brush their teeth. So we emphasize more of almost a Montessori learning system, where you develop independent skills and you develop those motor skills. And then as we transition into the elementary years, we focus more on a Charlotte Mason style, because it develops this literature-based education and this ability to think through a story and summarize a story, which is a really important skill for college. And the reason that I wrote my elementary guides, there's a lot of Charlotte Mason guides out there, but there were two things. One is that some of the Charlotte Mason guides are beautiful, but they're very complicated to pull together. You have to buy this resource and that resource and print out this
My brain
booklet.
hurt.
Yes,
I did research. I'm like,
I
want to homeschool Charlotte Mason style. And I started looking at it. I'm like, I don't want to homeschool.
Right. And I think it can get so complicated. And so for families like mine, where maybe you had some homeschool age kids and some preschool age kids, I wanted to simplify it where there's just a weekly grid. It's all laid out. We include nature study. We include poetry. We tell you what books to read, and you're always welcome to substitute. And so it's all kind of laid out in a very simple way. And then the other reason was the cost. We were a single income family, and we were missionaries for a while, and we didn't have hundreds of dollars to put down on homeschool curriculum. And so I really wanted to make resources where everything was there. The art was there. The poetry was there. The book lists were there, but it was a lot less expensive. And then you're responsible for printing it, but there's so many ways. People sometimes print it at home, or they send it to, there's the Homeschool Printing Company or Family Nest Printing, some really reasonable places to get your
I didn't even
printing
know about
done.
those.
Yeah.
Wow. And I will mention and make sure that people know that we're going to put links below this
Right.
video. So
Yes,
make
we want to help
sure
you.
you look at the links because with every video I do, I'm always like, yeah, because I know that it's easy to throw things out and people are like, wait, what was that? And so I always make
Right.
sure I put
Especially
links
when we're
below.
talking.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that is so beautiful. And, you mentioned books and how books are just such an important part. Do you guys have any family favorites?
Oh, yes, absolutely. One of the books that we read, we have with the Peaceful Press, we have 3 cycles of history. So we have a world history, a European history, and a American history. And last year we went through the world of the European history, and one of the books was called The Endurance, and then the other series we read was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, that whole series.
Oh, yeah.
And both of them were so integral to developing bravery, and they've really spoken to me. Like Reepicheep in the end of Voyage of the Dawn Treader, he talks about how he will keep swimming towards the, in my language it's Jesus, but he will keep swimming towards that hopeful future, no matter if his boat sinks, he will die swimming. And those words just held us up in this, during the quarantine season, and during that season our septic failed and we had a bunch of house guests. So there's always these hard times you go through, but when you read literature like that really holds you up and kind of keeps you going, it's so impactful.
Yeah, and both with fictional and nonfiction, because there's some times when you read, like, because I love missionary stories, and I probably talk too much about George Mueller, but that was probably one of the most impactful books to me, because I remember everybody talking to me, oh, you got to read George Mueller. And then you spend like your first, I don't know how many chapters, because we use the YWAM books. I don't know how many chapters it took me to get to it, but I'm like, when are we going to get to when he's finally a Christian? Like, it was just like, okay, he's making it like, but so I'm reading all this stuff with my kids, and it was great conversation. But man, oh man, like to look at the faith and to see what people have been through when you read biographical style books on history. So it's one thing to learn about the founding fathers, or the different wars or different people throughout history. It's another thing to really know their story. It's kind of like, I always compare it to when you hear about the Good Samaritan, you're like, yay, Good Samaritan, he stopped. But when you understand the history and the impact and the area that they were in and all of those types of things, and you have a new appreciation. Like the Good Samaritan was like at war, basically. Like these people groups were not meant to mix, and it was who was considered the enemy who took the time to stop and help the person. So it's just things like that are so impactful, and I think that's what stands out to our kids as well.
Yeah.
And helps them remember in those moments. And we had moments where, like, when my middle son Wade was, I think he was like 2, and we were going through a lot of stuff as a family, and we had this moment where we were just talking about things, and he just looks up from playing and he's just like, we should play like Mr. Mueller.
I
And it
love
was
that.
just like, what? And he had been listening to us read through this book, and he's like, we should pray. And he was just like, because God answers prayer like Mr. Mueller. And I was like, you're right. It was so precious.
Yeah, it's so amazing the opportunity we have to teach our kids, even on the subject of compassion, empathy. We read the book Mimosa by Amy Carmichael and the book The Single Shard by Linda Sue Park while we were reading about world history. And both of those books, to get a really bird's eye view of another culture and what people have to go through, the hunger they've suffered, develop so much compassion in our children. And then it translates into action. We really want to change the world for good and for help people be more hopeful. Reading these books helps our children develop the empathy that will then develop them into people who would do something to help the world.
Oh, right. No, because we want to be raising world changers too. Kids who are going to raise up to be adults who make an impact on the world, and for the Lord. Obviously, we're both women of faith. So, it's so amazing. Well, where can people find resources from that you're talking about, and just find you online and kind of follow along?
I'm on the peacefulpress.com, and we have a free book list for each of those cycles I was talking about.
Ooh, yeah.
And a free preschool book list. You can download a free sample of our resources. And I just, again, would encourage people to just take that leap. I think that so many people were maybe surprised that they could live with their children. You know, over this spring, everybody was homeschooling. And unfortunately, some school districts made it a little bit harder by overloading people with work. Some were more supportive in the way that they dealt with it. But I think so many families have realized, oh, I can live with my children at home. And then if you take the pressure off and realize that learning doesn't have to be sitting at a desk all day, it could be sitting in a circle and reading a book together, and then cooking a recipe together and talking about the book and writing about what you learned. If you can look at learning in this more lifestyle of learning where you're developing relationship as you learn, even if it's just for a year, it can be such a sweet memory building and relationship building time in your family.
Oh, I love that. Well, thank you so much for taking time to come and share with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Kristi. It was an honor to have the chance to chat with you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Simply Joyful Podcast. Be sure to check out all the episodes available by going to simplyjoyfulpodcast.com. Also, be sure to subscribe here on YouTube so you don't miss all of the other videos that we have coming your way. Have a great rest of your week, and don't forget to live simply and be joyful.